And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week. And as we begin Independence Weekend, we get word from President Biden that Vladimir Putin is winning the war in Iraq. That's comforting, isn't it? And he's introduced a new term to the American people, Bidenomics, which, from my vantage point, seems to be a pretty good thing for Republicans and conservatives because the American people know that the economy under Joe Biden is in a shambles. Literally, only 1 in 3 think that the economy is in the right direction and doing pretty well. That's 1/3 of the American people. That means the vast majority think that profligate spending and crazy inflation don't work so well for them. So let's help Biden brand Bidenomics as the key to understanding what's going on for the American people and their family budgets right now. And as the Supreme Court's term comes to a close, some major decisions handed down, most of them very good for the American people. One little minor hiccup with the case involving the North Carolina reapportionment, but it's not as bad as it appears on the surface, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit next week. But landmark cases on affirmative action where the court clearly did the right thing, on LGBTQ plus issues involving the woman in Colorado who wanted to run her own business without coercion from the government, and big time striking down the Biden plan for quote unquote student loan forgiveness. And as the facts on that roll out, we see more and more how that was really disproportionately favoring the elites and the rich, because an awful lot of these student loans were for law degrees, meaning that they were lawyers holding them, medical degrees, meaning they were medical doctors that were holding them, MBAs, etc. And a significant portion of them held by people over 50 years of age. So these were not the young folks just coming out of college who might be struggling. These were folks that had accumulated massive debt, some of them upside down, that Biden wanted to give a free ride to, putting the onus on the backs of young people who chose not to go to college or who chose to go to colleges that they could afford without massive student loans. It was a bad deal for the American people, a bad deal for students, and thank God the court struck it down. And we begin the celebration of American independence this weekend. What a glorious and marvelous thing that is to celebrate. And for many, tomorrow, July the 2nd, is the true Independence Day. John Adams certainly thought it was. We'll come to that in a minute. Because on July the 2nd, the Continental Congress, meeting in the Pennsylvania State House, now called Independence Hall in Philadelphia, voted to ratify the resolution of Richard Henry Lee of Virginia, which said that we are and ought to be free and independent states. And that, of course, was the true severing of ties with Great Britain. 2 days later, July the 4th, the Continental Congress affirmed the declaration written by the 5-person committee consisting of John Adams, one of the real driving forces behind American independence, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote much of the declaration from an apartment on Market Street, Benjamin Franklin, great Pennsylvanian, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, and Robert Livingston of New York. And so July the 4th became, for most Americans, Independence Day, but Adams always thought it would be July 2nd. He wrote to Abigail Adams saying that July 2nd would always be the greatest epic in American history and would be celebrated with, among other things, fireworks. So now we know why we have the fireworks displays in addition to the parades, which he mentioned, and the great celebrations of American independence. And as we celebrate that glorious couple of days in Philadelphia in 1776, maybe it would be a good idea to just take a minute in the midst of all the festivities, which are so appropriate to the time, and read the Declaration and reflect for a moment on what it meant for those brave 56 in Philadelphia to put their signatures on that. By the way, just as a parenthesis there, the Declaration didn't get signed by very many people on July the 4th. Most signed on August the 2nd, although others dribbed and drabbed in later. And interestingly, Robert Livingston, who was on the 5-member committee to draft the Declaration, never did sign it. But it's a document well worth reading and well worth remembering what the context was in which it was written, because for the first time, here were folks publicly declaring that their rights came not from another potentate, a king or a government, but from God himself, and that as such, no king or temporal power had the right to usurp power away from the people whom had been entrusted by the Almighty with their freedom. And in some ways, it doesn't seem right to add a footnote to all of that because the Independence Day celebrations are so pivotally important. But I thought I'd mention just one thing about the nation's pastime, baseball. And money can't buy you love, and it can't buy you success, because the New York Mets, with a payroll far eclipsing anybody else's, are mired in near last place in the National League East with a losing record. Money doesn't always buy happiness. And for now, happy Independence Day, happy Independence Day weekend. Celebrate America and American exceptionalism, because for now, that is the best 60-ish seconds of your week.